internet, so today I'm going to be doing my August wrap-up and September TBR, and I just want to start off by saying I cannot believe that it's already September. I read 6 books in the month of August, which is still pretty good, but it's not what I wanted it to be. I fell into a little bit of a reading slump this month, and so a lot of the books that I did get done, I kind of got done towards the end of the month. I'm starting to kind of get out of that slump, but I'm still kind of in recovery mode from that. So anyway, let's just get into the books. So the first book that I read in August was The Unexpected Everything by Morgan Matson. I have a review for this book that starts off spoiler free, and I will put a link to that down in the description, but I thought this book was absolutely adorable. It's probably one of my favorite contemporaries that I've read. It's pretty chunky for a contemporary, but I didn't get bored at all. I thought the cast of characters was fantastic. This book follows a girl named Andy, and she's one of those kind of girls who kind of has everything planned out. She's a planner, which is something that I can relate to because I'm definitely a planner too. And her dad is a pretty famous politician. Her dad kind of becomes involved in a scandal, and as a result, Andy's summer plans kind of go down the drain. So she's got to kind of figure out what she's going to do for her summer now, and if you can't tell by the cover, she ends up becoming a dog walker. A lot of other things happen, of course, but that's kind of the gist of the story. I ended up giving this book a 5 out of 5 stars. The next book I read was A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. This series is really hyped on BookTube, and I've gotta say I was not really much of a fan of the first book. Basically, this story is, or at least this book, is a very loose Beauty and the Beast retelling. It involves fairies. I do think that it should be more widely known on BookTube that this book does deal with emotional abuse, and that is in this book a lot, and there are a lot of weird, uncomfortable things that happen in this first book, which I will say, after reading the second book, it made a little more sense, but I wish that this book had dealt with it a little better, but that's just my personal opinion. I can't really say a whole lot more about this book without going to spoilers, but I ended up giving this book a 3.5 out of 5 stars. Wasn't a huge fan of it, and I kind of got into the slump while reading this book. And then after that, I read A Court of Mist and Fury by Sarah J. Maas, which is the next book, and kind of like I said, a lot of the things that happened in the first book were addressed in this book, and it made me feel a little bit better about some of the things that happened in the first book. But I do wish the first book had kind of dealt with those better, but this book was actually really fantastic. There were a few issues I had of things that happened in the first book that I still wish would have been dealt with more in the second book, but for the most part, things were dealt with really well. The story was a lot more entertaining, and the characters were a lot more entertaining, and it just made me feel a lot better about some of the situations from the first book. So I gave this book a 4.5 out of 5 stars. Really enjoyed it. It's really thick, so it did take me a while to get through just because I was already in the slump by that point. I understand why this book is the one that is definitely hyped on BookTube, because I really did enjoy the second one, and I'm looking forward to picking up the, I think it was originally going to be a trilogy, but I think there's going to be more now. I don't know a whole lot of details about that, but I'm looking forward to reading the rest of the story. I'll leave it at that. And I actually finished A Court of Mist and Fury during the Out of Books readathon, which it was the only book that I finished during the readathon. I had 6 books on the list. I finished that one. I was already halfway through it when the readathon started, and then during the readathon I started Illuminate by Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff, and I didn't actually finish this until I think the day after the readathon was already over, but oh well. This book was very interesting. It's a sci-fi novel, which I'm not a big sci-fi person, so it did kind of take me a little while to get into it, and also the format. So the thing about this book, and the reason it's so unique, is because it's told through like documents, emails, confidential files, journals, that kind of thing. And it took me a while to really get into that format and to really be able to understand everything that was going on. For me, the book didn't really pick up until about halfway through. And that was because I finally could kind of grasp what was going on, and it kind of makes me wonder what I missed or may have missed during the first half. I don't know. Overall, I ended up really enjoying this book once I got into it. It just kind of took me a little while, so I didn't enjoy it as much as I thought I would. And I think I gave this book a 4 to 5 stars. It was still a really entertaining story. It's really kind of hard to explain the plot without getting too spoilery, but basically there are 2 teenagers. They've just broken up that morning, and then a ship comes and starts killing people, and the 2 teenagers escape, but they're on different ships now, and they're still trying to communicate, and it's hard for me to explain. As you well know, I'm not very good at summarizing books anyway, but this one is especially hard for me to summarize, but I think it's more interesting to go into it not knowing anything anyway. So yeah, plus this book is so pretty. Let's talk about that cover, because you know how I am about covers. The next book I read was Hold Me Closer by David Levithan, and this is a companion to the novel Will Grayson, Will Grayson by John Green and David Levithan. And I will say, I think I would have enjoyed this book more if I had read Will Grayson more recently. It's been several years since I've read it. I think I was in high school when I read it. But basically, one of the characters in Will Grayson writes a musical about his life. And so this is the musical. As I got a little further into it, I kind of started to remember what kind of characters these people were. Like I said, I think I would have enjoyed it more if I had just recently read Will Grayson, but I still enjoyed it. I thought there were a lot of really cool themes in here, and good, just general lessons and stuff. I gave this book a 4 out of 5 stars. It's really short, and if you like the book Will Grayson, you will probably enjoy this. But if you have not read Will Grayson, this may not make a lot of sense to you, so yeah. And the last book that I read this month is A Monster Calls by Patrick Ness, inspired by an idea from Siobhan, I think, Dowd. And this is probably one of my favorite books that I have ever read. Basically, the idea behind this book is Siobhan Dowd, I still don't know if I'm saying her name correctly, had the idea for this book, and then before she was able to really finish it, she passed away from cancer, and so they asked Patrick Ness to basically finish it. But basically, the premise of the book, it follows the perspective of 13-year-old Connor. I think he was 13, and Connor's mom has cancer. Connor keeps getting these nightmares, and you don't find out what the nightmare is until the end of the book, but you can kind of get an idea of what it's probably about. All of a sudden, he starts having dreams about this different kind of monster. It's not really a nightmare, but the monster wants to help Connor get to the truth. His truth. It ended up being a very, very heartwarming book. The stories that the monster tells Connor go very deep, and just everything that Connor realizes in this book goes very deep. And I just think that the idea of using the monster for Connor to learn these things was just a fantastic way to do it. This writing was really good. It's illustrated by Jim Kay, who illustrated the illustrated Harry Potter books. Pictures really do add to the story. Overall, I just really, really loved this story. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. As you can see, this is a library copy, but I do plan on buying my own copy of this book, because this is one I'm definitely going to want to reread. And I didn't realize this at the time, but there's actually a movie of this book coming out, I think, in October, maybe? So I'm hoping that the movie does the book justice, but it's very short. I highly recommend this book if you haven't read it. I will say that I am not a person who cries often in books. I will often tear up, but I don't often cry in books, and this book left me sobbing. Take that to mean what you will. So those are all the books that I read in August, and now I'm going to get to my September TBR. I'm going a little ambitious on my September TBR. I don't actually know if I'm going to actually read all of the books I have on my September TBR, but at least I'll have options. So first we'll go with what I'm currently reading. I'm currently reading 2 books right now, the first of which is City of Bones by Cassandra Clare, and this is actually a reread for me, and I am listening to this book on audiobook. And basically, I decided to give this a reread because I read it a couple years ago, like 2 or 3 years ago, and I never continued on with the series. I don't know why. I bought the 2nd and 3rd book, but I just never got around to reading them, and I've been kind of wanting to, but I didn't remember enough about this book to feel comfortable jumping into the 2nd book. So I decided to listen to this one on audiobook, and so far I'm really enjoying going through the story again. Not super crazy about the narrator, but still enjoying it, and I'm a little over halfway through, so I'll probably be finishing this one up in the next week or so. I am also still currently reading Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. Now, don't get me wrong, I did get a good chunk of this book read in August, but I did not get anywhere near the end. When the month started, I was only maybe like this far into it, and so I did read a big chunk of it, but I did not get anywhere near finishing it. And I'm thinking that I might, after I finish City of Bones on audiobook, I might give this audiobook a try, so that way maybe I'll actually finish this book one day. Yeah, I've been reading this book for way too long, so this is the month, guys. I know I said that last month, but this is the month. My main priority for September is going to be to read Empire of Storms, which is the 5th Throne of Glass book. It comes out on September 6th. I'm so excited. If you've watched any of my earlier videos, I've talked about Throne of Glass a lot. I got super obsessed with the series and like read all of them in the month of June. I'm really, really excited about Empire of Storms. It's gonna be really long. It's gonna be a crazy ride. I already know it, and I'm just so looking forward to it. I think this is probably my favorite series next to Harry Potter, and I don't say that lightly. So I'm really excited about Empire of Storms. It comes out in 5 days. I've pre-ordered it. I better have it the day that it comes out. So excited. And then I have a couple of books left over from my August TBR that I just didn't get around to. The first of which is A Gathering of Shadows by V.E. Schwab. This has been on my TBR for several months now. I still haven't gotten around to it, but this is the sequel to A Darker Shade of Magic, and this series is an adult fantasy series. I really, really enjoyed A Darker Shade of Magic, so I really want to get to this book at some point. I just haven't done it yet. And yes, these are the UK covers because I bought the first book whenever I was studying abroad in London, so might as well keep collecting the UK covers. But I like the UK covers, even though the US ones are very pretty too. I do like the UK covers, particularly the spines. Gonna try and get to this month. Another leftover book from last month and a couple of months prior is Winter by Marissa Meyer, which is the conclusion to the Lunar Chronicles, which is a series I've been reading this year. Really, really enjoying them. The Lunar Chronicles is basically sci-fi retellings of fairy tale. So the first book, Cinder, is obviously Cinderella, and then you have Scarlet, which is Little Red Riding Hood, Cress, which is Rapunzel, and then Winter, which is Snow White. And all of the characters from all the books kind of get together and their stories intertwine in each book, and I've heard that this is a fantastic finale to the series, so I'm really hoping to get to this month. And even though this doesn't look very big, this is actually over 800 pages because they printed it on this really thin paper for some reason, and I think Empire of Storms is also printed on really thin paper, which I'm not a huge fan of, but I'm not going to let that ruin the reading experience for me. Also on my list for this month is Persuasion by Jane Austen. This is a pretty short Jane Austen book, and this is actually the September pick for the Ostentatious Book Club, which is a Jane Austen book club started by Zoe from Read by Zoe, which is one of my favorite booktubers. I love her, and she started the club last month with Pride and Prejudice, but since I've read that book twice, I didn't participate last month. I'm really excited to participate this month and read Persuasion. I've heard this is a fantastic Jane Austen novel. I think this is one of the most loved Jane Austen novels, so I'm really excited to get to this one this month. And finally, the last book on my TBR for September is Six of Crows by Leigh Bardugo. I don't know a whole lot about this book, but I do know that it is about a heist, and it takes place in the same universe, same world that Leigh Bardugo's Grisha trilogy takes place in, which I also have not read. But the sequel to Six of Crows, Crooked Kingdom, comes out at the end of this month. This is going to be a duology, and Leigh Bardugo is actually making a stop in Nashville on her book tour, so I want to go meet her because her books are supposed to be really good, but I gotta read Six of Crows first, and possibly part of the Grisha trilogy. I've heard some mixed things about the Grisha trilogy, so I don't really want to buy them. So I think I'm gonna see if my library has the first book, which I think is called Shadow and Bone, and then if I like it, maybe I'll buy the rest of the books. And I think that there's a box set coming out of the Grisha trilogy on the same day Crooked Kingdom comes out, so I may wait until that comes out and then just get all three. We'll see. Really looking forward to getting to this book, and the pages are black, which are really cool, or at least the end pages are, and I'm really excited about Crooked Kingdom because the end pages are going to be red, so it's gonna look really cool. So I think this video has been long enough. Let me know down in the comments if you've read any of these books and what you thought, and I will see you guys next time with another video. Bye!